Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to start by introducing my colleagues in the panel for this afternoon. So to my far right, I have Rexhep. So he's the founder of Akrivia and master watchmaker, winner of the GPHG in 2018 and 2022. So he will have some interesting insights from a watchmaker's point of view. My next colleague is Jean-Claude. He's the CEO of Joux-Perret. They are manufacturers of chronographs and high complicated movements. And then my colleague directly to my right is Pascal. And Pascal is the Vice President of the Fondation for Haute Horlogerie. He's also the President for the cultural part of the business and is the watchmaking expert for the FHH. So to start with, I just want to give a quick background because we're here today to discuss a topic which is very often overlooked in the watchmaking world, which is the subject of after-sales service. And the question which we are debating today is after-sales service treated as an afterthought? In the realm of haute horology, craftsmanship and innovation is obviously center stage. And luxury watches, as we're all aware, are much more than just timekeepers. They have artistry, engineering, and of course, watchmaking heritage. But the thing that gets overlooked sometimes is what happens to the watch once it actually leaves the boutique. So to answer this question, this actually tells us quite a lot about the manufacturer and the watchmaker producing the item and about their commitment not only to their product but also to their customers. I myself am General Manager for Swiss Watch Services, so I'm running a large independent workshop. So from my point of view, of course, after-sales service should never be an afterthought. It's an integral part of the luxury watchmaking experience. And I'll just give you a few thoughts as to why I believe that to be the case. First and foremost, luxury watch is more than just a long-term investment. These timepieces are designed to obviously stand the test of time and to be handed down to the next generation. But even the best made watch is going to require maintenance and repair throughout its life. Neglecting the service neglecting after-sales service basically it would be like abandoning a piece of artwork and then not having it restored. A watch is a highly personal item. Nobody needs to buy a highly complicated watch, and the reason that people buy them is because they have a passion and they have an interest in horology. So the connection that they have to their timepiece is an emotional one. This can seriously impact or be impacted if the after-sales service that they then receive, if they have an issue or when the watch comes for maintenance, is not actually taken care of in a good way. Now, many brands have already awoken to this issue and are already providing very high levels of customer service. This is through the extension of wider warranties and obviously transparency in what they do. But in order to maintain this, it's really important that we have investment in training for the skilled watchmakers that are required to maintain and take care of these timepieces, and that obviously there is a network of authorized service centers who have access to the materials and spare parts in order to maintain those pieces. So, I shall hand over now to my colleagues, and we shall have their opinion on whether they think after-sales service is an afterthought. Would you like to begin, Pascal?
Okay. So I'm starting. Hello, everyone. I think definitely, especially today that we are speaking more and more about customer experience, after-sales service is definitely a part, should definitely be a huge part of it. Because one thing is buying a nice watch that is a very personal item that is going to last for a lifetime. So you know this ad, you're never the owner of this timepiece, but the keeper for the next generation. So therefore, you should be entitled to maintain it and receive a customer service that's really at the level on par with the level you had when you first bought it. So definitely for me, it's not even a question, it's a given.
Yeah, I see it today, it's quite difficult to talk about after-sales service. As La Joux-Perret is designing and making movements, the customer are coming to us with a vision and a dream, which is really, I like to work. But then if you start production, I start also the question, okay, now we have to talk about after-sales service parts. And often for the customer it's too early. And the item, the topic to talk about after-sales service is really not so sexy for the brand. Because you have to produce more parts for how many years? It's also a question we talk to customers. Should we have parts for 10, for 20, for 30 years? How many parts? And at the end, they have no clue at the beginning because the watch is new. And often we talk then after 1 year later, they come and say, okay, now we need spare parts. What do you have? At the end, I have nothing. And then we start to talk about after-sales service. Because these departments of after-sales service, they are not really today integrated in the development process. And we should them integrate. And we should also have feedback from service centers as you manage to look what could we do better in future. What are the critical parts and so on. And I think that this process has started now, but it's not perfect at the moment.
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, in the old days, we used to have a rule, certainly within some of the bigger brands, that obviously when they were producing calibers, that they would have spare parts stock for a minimum of 20 years. But as you said, that requires a lot of forward planning, a lot of forward thought, which today isn't always the case, especially now with there being so many small niche brands. And obviously that can cause an issue for us in after-sales service in then actually maintaining and taking care of those products.
So for my side, I would say, I launched the company 11 years and a half ago. So for the moment, we don't have that much surprise, I would say. But will happen for sure. What we're trying to do, and this is why, we're doing decoration and different things, but we're trying really to do the best to be able to having less surprise. But even if we will have surprise, we're trying to explain to our collector that it's new. For the moment, nobody until today, no one of our collector pay anything if something happened in the watch. Because for me, I just want to learn. So I want just to be very open with our collector, to show them it's a human thing, and just to ask them to help and to be part of the family and just seeing what happened. And, I will try to do this until I'm able. But, the quality and why we're doing the decoration, not only visibly, but also we're trying to do our best on the axis, for example, and things like that to be sure that we'll have less, how we can say in English, d'usure.
Less wear and damage.
Yes. So, yeah. But I would say I think it's really important. We're trying really to think long term, and everybody should care about it. And after that, you have also other things that we learn every day. Like, for example, it's good to think about the component in terms of product, but also to trying to manage also the contact, the response to being good. So actually, it's hard because it's very easy to criticize, but it's hard to put it all together. But I think it's really important, again, just to be very clear, to talk openly, to be honest, and when you do some mistakes, to be open to receive it and to adjust it. So
absolutely. And the other part, which is very important, because even if we had all the spare parts in the world. We have to have trained technicians, and we have to have qualified people of the correct standard and level. So training for the next generation of watchmakers in order for us to continue to maintain the product is very, very important.
I will add one other thing, but it's true. This is why also, I in a way, to try to responsibilize everybody here in my workshop, for example, every watchmaker is in a way responsible of his watch. If something happened, for sure I will take it, I control, I'm trying to understand what happened, but I will give it to him to really try to learn of the mistakes, right? So it's in one way to try to responsibilize.
Yeah. From the FHH point of view, in terms of training and support, can you explain how you go about that, and obviously the work that you do with WASTEP and so on?
So us at the FHH, FHH is really about education. We don't educate technical personnel. We just educate non-technical staff and final customers alike. I think what WASTEP is doing in the market is really something that is most useful as, with the cumulative effect we had, the last 20, 25 years have been booming in terms of watch production. And so the more watches you sell, like let's say roughly speaking, 20 million watches per year are exported from Switzerland. After 20 years, you have 400 million watches in the market. And these watches, they have a return rate, and at some point they need to get back for repair or maintenance. And so it's a huge effect that is going to continue to rise. And so we already have a lack of skills watchmaker in Switzerland, but in the markets, I think it's even worse. Yep. And you can't have all these watches that need to be repaired back to Switzerland. That would be just impossible. So I think the efforts that WASTEP is doing is putting into creating schools of watchmakers locally in the market is critical for the success, and also for the manageable part of customer service and after sales in general.
Yeah. And from a manufacturer's point of view?
Yeah, I think we need this local service due to watchmakers, but also if you look due to timing, transportation cost, insurance cost, that if every watch is coming back to Switzerland and then back again in the country, already, let's say 500 Swiss francs are going away without doing anything. And I think it cannot be that the final customer is paying for all this. So we have to look for local service partners with a good level of education.
I have to think about it. I think again, we are small, so for the moment it's not something that, but if it's possible, for sure. But for the moment, we really prefer to having the watch back in Switzerland, and again, to learn. I know that is maybe this is the negative point, I think, for the collectors, but it's important, if you want to help the company grow, you participate to this kind of achievement, so yeah.
I think it's also it's a question of cost. Cost is really, one thing. Now we could also argue the fact that high-end watch is produced with a certain amount of margin, and that maybe in the production phase and also in the conception phase, but also in the whole mix of price, after-sales service could be, included in the whole thing as something that costs. Because at the end of the day, when you're sending the watch back and forth, it's not for the final client to account for. So I think this thinking is not exactly on top of mind of every brand today. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. But I think, again, from a customer standpoint, it's very important. Otherwise, you think the customer journey is not complete. Yeah. If it stops after you've bought the watch, then there's something wrong in luxury.
And then, of course, we have another solution, and I'm not sure, as a manufacturer of movement, if that's the right thing. I see a lot of brands also making movement exchange in the countries. So that means the customer gets the new movement, and the old movement is then sent back to Switzerland. But here I have really a question: if you have really your own watch and we simply change the whole movement, is this still the same watch or not?
Yeah, and this is obviously something which is very important for customers, because when you purchase your watch, it has a serial number, it has an identity, and when you get your watch back, you want to know that you have got your watch back, and that it's not just been an exchange that's been carried out, especially on luxury product. So I think maybe for some of the mass market, I think that's an acceptable and understandable solution, especially with the shortage of watchmakers that we have. But certainly when we're looking at luxury watchmaking, it's something that some people look at, but it's not something that I have to say that I personally am particularly comfortable with.
I think also my personal opinion is that you should have the same movement back.
Absolutely.
Again, not always going back to the cost, but isn't it also linked to the category? I mean, of course, you don't envisage after-sales service for Rexhep the same way you envisage a swatch movement service, and it's not the same price, not the same. Yeah. Well, so I think it really depends. I think for some level it could be acceptable, but where is the limit? That's.
Yeah.
This is why I think it's really more difficult for us to say frankly. Because, you know, we don't have that much margin. This is why we focus really totally about the product, and we don't have choice. You have to do good. You have to do some good things. So this is why, honestly, yeah, it's a challenge, and this is why we should not think about doing money for the first years and just focus on doing something better.
Yeah. And another important factor from an after-sales point of view is obviously the speed at which things can be done, which obviously can sometimes be limited by supply of spare parts. So certainly in our experience at Swiss Watch Services, with the luxury products that we deal with, in most cases we can get quite a fast turnaround, but we do have situations where, from a manufacturing point of view, a particular item may have come to the end of its production run, all the parts are done, and then you have to start to then reconsider, we have an issue now, how are we going to resolve this? From a small brand point of view, I suspect if you needed to, you could manufacture whatever parts would be required.
For me, it's very easy. So we have, if we had to redo a component, it's okay. We have plan, we have everything, we know how to do. This is not a problem. But to say frankly, I also try to do more component to be sure that we can exchange. But again, it's a big cost. It's a big cost. But I try, honestly, this is why sometimes I'm late also. But I'm trying just to be sure about it. And this is a big problem because it's your job, it's your baby, it's your... So you want to put everything, possible to be sure that it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for your ego, it's hard for your time, it's hard for everything. So it's really, you have really different attachment to this. So again, you just want to do your best, and this is why you never think about losing at the end money or things like that. You just want to be sure that you did the best, So.
But from a larger manufacturer's point of view, it's a slightly different scenario. So if you've had a production run and obviously parts are now come to the end, do you ever consider going back into production to make new pieces?
Yeah, we have to. I give you an example of a big brand. They bought 10 years ago movements from us, and last year I saw they have ordered 150 different orders for spare parts. You can imagine the cost. So I proposed them that we make now again a run on this movement, but with a few thousand. Because the cost to produce 150 times a few screws or wheels is like a... But I have seen that in this company that was not linked. All these orders were not linked together.
Yeah.
But we have to do. I still have in my stock parts from movements 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I will never throw them away.
No. As watchmakers, we're all hoarders, so yeah, nothing ever gets thrown away.
No, we also, if you have a customer and we have to produce one part, we will do it.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we can then not build this cost, but it's, as you mentioned before, it's a service to our customer and to the final customer.
Yeah.
And it's always really great to see if you can repair something which is quite old and the movement is working again properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And going forward, in terms of the use of more modern technologies in terms of tracking, tracing, using NFTs and things like this, which I think from an after-sales point of view, I think will have a big role to play in the future, because if you have ownership of a piece and then it's handed on to someone else, then obviously having the full traceability, I think, is something which is becoming increasingly more important for the collector. But are there any other technologies that you would envisage could be important for the future? Or how would you see NFTs being used, or other technologies?
Thank you. So I'm taking the customer standpoint. I think as a watch owner, I would love to have a traceability of the previous owners, maintenance and repairs, etc. I think it's very important going forward to have a watch that you know where it's coming from, and that the service centers actually knows what's. I think really the full traceability is really something that should follow every watch. I think it's only useful, and not only for statistic reasons, but also to understand what's going on, what has been done on my watch, and to know whether the movement has been exchanged or not. And so, yeah, as a collector, I would like to know that.
Yes, I think it's a point we are looking for to introduce that. Then, as a neutral movement manufacturer, we have the problem that if you're talking to the brands, that we have, with 20 brands, we have 20 different solutions. And that's then quite hard to handle. So we push a little bit for a standard on this level.
I have my lawyer keep talking to me about all this, but I have to figure out, and maybe eventually one day, but for the moment, no.
Yeah, no, maybe something I wanted to add in a technological side. We are on the era of communication, and so we know everything in real time, all the time. But from the moment you give your watch for service or maintenance or repair, it disappears in a sort of black hole. It's like outer space, and you don't know what's happening with your watch. Now it's improving, but the majority probably of brands are not yet proactive in the way the communication is handled between the customer and its watch while in the repair field. And I think this is definitely technologically something that is very easy to manage, that hasn't been put in place yet, and that would also probably help in the steering the process that is actually seamless, to know where is my watch, what is happening, etc., etc. And I know many customers discussing with people who buy a watch and have had this experience. The watch disappears for a month or even more sometimes, and you don't know what happens. And so the communication is not seamless at all. Whereas upfront, when you need to buy a watch, the communication goes very well. So I think it's important, again, throughout the whole process, and the communication, the technology is existing. So
that's one of the things that SWSO is aware now investing into, so that we actually have communication, or we're going to have communication systems, which mean that not only do we have direct interaction with the customer, but there is a portal that the individual customer can actually come into and actually follow and track a repair throughout the whole process, and then they know what the lead time is, when it's coming back. And as you said, this is important because there's nothing worse from the customer. As you said, the watch disappears into service and it disappears for 4 weeks and it's in a black hole. You have no idea what's happening. Whereas if you know that it's gone through diagnostics, it's now gone into the workshop, it's now been polished, it's now with the technician, and now it's ready for collection, these updates give the customer a lot of reassurance, and it reinforces the fact that you are providing a quality service. So in terms of going forward and training for retail, because we mentioned obviously that that's mainly your area, what do you think the developments in terms of that are going to be? Because obviously one of the challenges that is had in retail is the high turnover of staff, and people don't tend to stay as long in retail at the shop floor level as they do certainly within the after-sales service. So how do we develop that training for them?
Well, definitely it's difficult for me to take a position where this is really more brand/retailer question to handle the proper training and to retain the staff. It's difficult for me really to take position on that. What I'm sure of is that, I mean, training is key in all parts, and it starts from educating your customer why high-end, very added value product can have wear and tear, why it needs maintenance the same way as your car does. And actually a lot of customers, especially in the last few years coming into the hobby, they have never been sensibilized to this, and they actually don't know that a movement is actually prone to wear, and actually at some time it needs repair and it's going to cost. So education from the customer standpoint, but also from the staff to handle things properly so that the customers can be reassured. And when a customer enters the boutique, it's not like a pain because he's giving his watch back to service, but it's actually an occasion to interact with him and also probably make customer retention for a longer term.
And from the independent watchmaker's point of view?
Yes, we have to teach all of them all around the world. No. You know, again, we're just a small team, and for sure we have really to think about it. But for the moment, we can't. We really can't. I think it's require a lot of energy, a lot of teaching process. You know, actually, when I have a watchmaker join my team, I have about between 1 to maybe 2 years just teaching, to being able to doing the decoration, the assembling, dependent complication, you know. So I would say not for the moment.
Any other points we want to raise? Or shall we open the floor open to questions?
Thanks. I'm going to give it right back to you. Clearly, we have different levels of scale, price points, expectations, perhaps. And I guess I have a question for all of you, but starting with you, Rexhep, which is on a watch where you're making of a particular caliber, maybe 50 examples, right? Not 500, not 5,000, not 500,000. Should the expectation of the buyer be that there will be the need for adjustments and repairs in the early days, that it's a little bit of a tuning process, or should the expectation be that it should be perfect when we take it out of the box?
So, actually, it's a really good question, and I think, you know, I tried all these years, you know, to trying to explain that when you develop a new movement and you're taking a new movement who is already existing, for sure, you're taking a big risk. I have to say the truth. But this is really what also the collector maybe had to understand, that when they get something that it's new, it's new movement, they had something maybe more special, they had something maybe more rare than to taking just an ébauche who already exists, right? I think you can have, but our challenge depends the company again, but personally my challenge is to try to do something that it's even better. And actually I will take the challenge in this way. I believe that, you know, like young watchmakers or all the new generation, we should do better because we've seen the past. We have different tools today. We have different programs that we can use that then can help to doing better. So yes, I don't give credit to myself, but my job is today more easy than a few years ago. So we should have maybe more surprise, but until today, honestly, I'm quite happy, and we don't have that much surprise.
I think one of the unspoken assumptions, perhaps, thus far in the discussion has been that we're talking about conventional movements in conventional metals and materials used for cases and things like that. But what made me curious to ask this question was whether the introduction of silicon components inside movements or the use perhaps of ceramics for case materials and bracelets in the long term makes after sales easier or more difficult because the manufacturing processes involved with using these new materials are also perhaps fundamentally different from what has conventionally been the case. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether that has been more or less challenging to deal with.
So from an after-sales service centre point of view, certainly the use of silicium in the escapements, yes, it gives us a lot of big advantages. We're able to tune and get the timekeeping to very, very high standard. The issue with silicium is that if it gets a shock, it's done, and it has to be replaced. The same with ceramic. It's a fantastic material. You can produce great designs, and you can have bracelets, cases, and other components made out of ceramic. But because it is so hard, it's also very brittle. And when it's broken, there is no repair that you can carry out. It's an industrial process to produce the part, and therefore the only option that you have is to actually replace. And so, you know, many brands, famous one within the Swatch Group, has had numerous different designs which have run for a short period of time and then not really progressed and evolved any further because of the issues that they've had with ceramic. But then they've had other products which have been very successful and have run for many, many years, which are put together in combination with other materials. So from an after-sales point of view, it's challenging, but it's also relatively easy to deal with because it's either going to work and we can make small fine adjustments in terms of movement, but if it's casing parts, it's a replacement.
Yes, I agree. If you put silicon parts on the movement, then you need really special trained people to disassemble these parts. Because if you treat them as the normal watch parts, normally they break.
Yep.
And then thank you. And then does the manufacturing for these parts further down the line become any easier or perhaps even more difficult because they are, you know, relatively more exotic? You talked about, for example, you know, having to produce parts well in advance, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But do you need to have that same sort of timeline in mind when thinking of, you know, a silicon part, for example?
No, for us, the silicon parts we can produce in the same lot size as the other mechanical parts, so we don't need to produce that 30 years in advance. What is important is the technical documentation on it. Of course, I cannot see how we do in 20 years silicon parts. Probably have a problem that we don't find the old machines again. So, but for the moment, it's not a problem.
Hello, this has been a very informative panel, so thank you to the panelists. I build blockchain solutions for brands, and you brought up a great point, Jean-Claude, about standardization. So what are some of the pain points that you see from, and this is for the entire panel, for watchmakers, retailers, and distributors in terms of how they're going to utilize NFTs and blockchain?
Yeah, standardization, it's a big word, huh? Because on one hand we have in Switzerland the standard movements, huh? But they are in fact dying. And I think the future is, as my colleague on the right side, young people like he with a lot of creativity, which will design wonderful movements, not standard movements. And I think that's a little bit the future of the Swiss watch industry. Then, of course, we have all this digital solution, how we can track parts, movements, and watch cases. And probably that is then the solution, because if everybody is doing their own movement and special movements, then we have a headache that the variants are too big. But on the other hand, with the digitalization, we can handle it.
Hi. Just on that point, I would like to raise maybe a thought here for maybe a Swiss government body to be a custodian for the blueprints of the assembly and the service manuals, digitally or film maybe. That could be an option for someone like a service center or an independent service person, not to do the service currently, but whenever it's ceased to exist in whatever form from the manufacturer or the company itself. And this just to share the knowledge in a controlled manner. Maybe it is the Swiss government body that is, and to share it with, upon request, for a certain cost or fee, or just a subscription base.
So for the after-sales service centres, there is a similar thing which already happens, but obviously it's not open to all. So this is with the brands themselves over the last 10 years, and is still continuing. They have all been in the process of putting their information, technical data, and all their, what we call them, working instructions, digitally available through their own intranets. So if you are an authorized repairer to work on a particular brand, then you have access to all their technical information. The issue, and that I fully appreciate the size of the challenge, if you have a brand which has been around for over 100 years, they have literally thousands of different documents that need to be all digitized and then made available. And you have to have a balance, because out of those 1,000 documents, there's probably only about 50 of them that are going to get used on any kind of a regular basis. But it is available, and it's something that is growing, and certainly for us in a service centre, it's a huge help, because if we do see something which is a little bit more unusual, we can go to the library, we can pull out the information, and we have everything that we need to know. So we have all the components, we know what lubrication should be used where, the best way to actually take the movement apart and reassemble it. So it's something which is already in process.
I think there is a question there.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. Trust you well. I actually have like 3 questions, but I'll start with one. So, number one, we know that it's funny how the industry has changed, as we know that, you know, in the beginning there were watchmakers, then they had apprentices, then the schools were there, and then now it's like you've got to be certified at the school to be considered. But there's still regions, you know, due to the schools not being available in all regions. There are still watchmakers that come into the industry. I'm referring to myself here. I was a watchmaker's apprentice, so yes, I'm a technician. But then going out into the world, trying to be attractive to like a bigger service center or a more authorized service center was a big challenge that sort of killed the fire. So I think my first question is for technicians like me, because I know there's other people like me. I'm from South Africa. the school closed in 91. I was not even born when the school closed. So there's technicians, though. I think most people that are working in the industry there are from those schools, but it's all aging. There's a few of them that are really actively training people. Like my mentor, his biggest thing was like, I'm gonna die with this information. I might as well pass it on. So like, how do technicians, those sort of technicians that go into the industry like that, make themselves sort of attractive, whether it be to manufacturers, to people that are doing movements for assembly, or just like general authorized service center? How could they maybe build from that skill that they gained while being one-on-one trained and be attractive to the greater industry? So that's my first question. And then my second question is, I mean, in a year, there's like how many new watch launches? Like, I could like say 50. There could be more, could be less. And then from these schools, how many graduates are coming out? And to think that for the full 300 hours, it's like a 2-year course. And then now there's been shorter course for service-oriented people that it's just a year and then, you know, you're ready to work. But I believe the numbers don't really match each other, like the launches and the watchmakers coming out of the school. So the gap is there for skills, and I don't think it's closing anytime soon. So I'm not saying brands should launch less watches, but I mean just how the balance. And of course, a watch doesn't need a service every year. It could be once in 5 years, once in 3 years, once in wherever. And then I think, so the question there is like, how can, you know, what could the industry maybe really do to sort of make sure that, I'm not saying like now we need 50 watchmakers every year. I think that would be good for the industry though. But how could it sort of be in line with each other, like sort of the communication, matching the skills and every new watch that comes out and all. And then my third question has to go with independent service centers. We've seen a lot of those come up recently, and it's good because it would be watchmakers that are also looking to share their skills or are qualified and trained by the brands, but because of geolocation, they decided to open their own workshops, but now their problem still becomes spare parts. How could those service centers like either get the licensing or get the rights to sort of purchase spare parts if they've got the people that are qualified by the brands that they work with? Because I think those watchmakers also struggle. I know this from experience. I've met they are trained by Rolex or Audemars and whatnot, but even though they set up their own service center, they are unable to access spare parts. Thus, they can't really give 150% service to their customers. Okay. I have more, but I'll stop there. So
I think the 3 points are all actually linked together. In terms of the watchmaker training and accreditation, and someone having done an indentured apprenticeship rather than having done a WASTEP qualification or, as I did, a BHI qualification. Just to give you an example, so SWS is the largest independent workshop in the world. So I have 65 technical staff. I would say more than half of my technical staff don't have a formal school qualification. They have learned the job through experience, through internal training. So some of my staff may start, for example, working in, say, diagnostics, then they may move into case prep. From case prep, they may start to do some simple repairs, and we constantly train, and we have people mentoring within the business. In terms of the schools themselves, this is something which obviously it's not only a responsibility of the repair centres, it's a responsibility of the brands. The brands, as we've heard, are producing more and more movements, which is fantastic because it's more and more business for me in the future. But they have a role to play in this as well. And obviously with organisations like WASTEP, all the large Swiss brands are involved in supporting WASTEP and in order to develop watchmaking programs. So there are opportunities out there, and for service centres like ourselves, if we receive an application from a watchmaker, if they don't have a WASTEP or a BHI or an American qualification, we don't dismiss them. What we want to do, just the same as we would do with a WASTEP qualified watchmaker, is we want to sit them at the bench and we want to actually see what can you do. And if you can do the work to the quality that we need and obviously produce a good quantity of work within a timely fashion, that's the main criteria. So having the WASTEP qualification or something else it's a cherry on the top. It makes the selection easier from an employee point of view, because I know that if someone comes with a WASTEP qualification and they have this grade, I have a pretty good idea what they can do before they arrive. Same with an FBHI, same with other qualifications that we receive around the world. But nobody, certainly in my organization, would be just turned away simply because you don't have a school qualification. Now, in terms of the process for then getting into spare parts. So if you are a qualified watchmaker, again, the standards that different brands apply has also changed over the years. So when I first started training years ago, when you went to a brand, so if you went to Rolex, Omega or Audemars, you attended a course, and if you passed the course, you got a lovely certificate to say you are qualified to do this. No longer happens anymore. You are registered within the brand and they know what you can do and you know what you can do and your employer knows what you can do. But it's not something that you any longer have that you could then take as portable. You obviously put it on your CV that I've done this course, this course, this course. But those qualifications that used to be are no longer available as a certificate. Now, the reason for that is because many of them have gone down the route of selective distribution. And I fully understand, because I was an independent watchmaker myself, how frustrating it can be that you have a product in front of you, you know you can repair it, you know you have no issues, but I can't get the parts because I haven't got whatever piece of paper that means the brand can give me the spare parts. The reason for this is because the brands are also trying to protect their product. Because in all honesty, if you bring your watch to Nick Towndrow's Watch Repairs, and I do an awful job, and you have an issue with it, and the watch goes backwards and forwards 2 or 3 times, and in the end, you lose heart with it, and you put it in a drawer. In 3 years' time, when you open the drawer, and you pull it out, and you're having a clear out, and you find that branded watch at the back of the drawer, after 3 years, you probably can't even remember Nick Towndrow's Watch Repairs. But your first thought will be, that brand of watch is rubbish, it doesn't work. So the reason why they have the selective distribution is to make sure that the quality and the standards are actually maintained. Now, one of the things I think will need to happen as time goes by is that will need to be made easier, but there are issues in terms of the training and everything that can be given to get people authorized. But over time, it will be something that will come.
Maybe just to come back on your launch, number of launches per year that are happening versus the number of watchmakers that can actually produce it. I think the industry is working on innovation all the time, and you have to have a certain number of launches per year to keep the ball rolling, because I mean, if you're not doing it, your competitors will do. So it's a constant competition that actually gets the whole thing swirling. And so the number of launches are not going to diminish, but again, the cumulative process means that there are more and more watches in circulation that will need to have repairs, and that obviously today the numbers don't add up. You won't have more watchmakers ready to repair them than you have today. So tomorrow is going to be worse, and after tomorrow is going to be worse. And now there's something with which the whole industry has to live and try to find solutions. It won't happen overnight, but we'll have to find a solution collectively. First, maybe by having launches of products that are more reliable, therefore they don't return for repairs or less than before. That may sound easy, but actually it has to be encompassed in the whole development process. And this is what I was trying to say from the beginning, is that when you are planning a new launch, then the whole repair process, the whole conception for not having a repair process has to be encompassed in the R&D. And this is maybe a shift in the thinking, in the way you envisage a new product or collection.
Good afternoon, everyone. Linking back to the point that was raised by one of the ladies about watchmakers and the ability to have enough watchmakers in the industry. So would you foresee that in the future there would be robots would be replacing watchmakers with such, moving into artificial intelligence, and how, detailed is the watchmaking industry itself?
So, okay, I'll jump in first. So, from an after-sales service point of view, no. Because the process in after-sales service is not like production. So, there is a certain amount of automation which is used within production. However, when you are dealing from an after-sales service point of view, you're talking about diagnostics, you're talking about making adjustments. You can have 5 movements, all exactly the same caliber, all with exactly the same reported issue from the customer, and each one needs a different solution in order to resolve it. Now, AI is very good at producing documents, marketing, things like this, but at the moment, and I'm not saying it can't happen in the future, but at the moment, we don't have the AI and the robotics together that would be able to do that.
Of course, in the production, we are using robots. But you have also to take care about one point. For example, I'm doing still a manual guillochage. I could do it with the robot perfectly. Then you have a guillochage which is really perfect. No failure, nothing. But it's not what the customer has paid and not what the customer often wants. So I have to do it by hand. So I have steps with robots, and then I have manual work. And I have to follow also a little bit the tradition and what the final customer has paid for.
No, I think it's really, sorry, but going back to the price point, if you are paying for a swatch with a System 51, movement that is yet done by robots fully, then it's acceptable. And you're buying a Rexhepi watch, probably absolutely not. And the machine finishing is acceptable for a certain price point when the people understand that the value that is delivered by a machine is okay towards what they've paid, but the value that the human hand is bringing is multiplying this perception, and actually the fact that it's imperfect makes it actually more valuable to the eyes of the customer. So I think there's no one answer to this question. So a lot of things can be standardized, and that would be okay for very high volume watches, but some things can't or will never be acceptable to standardize because the human hand is the final value.
And even in terms,
I'm not fully agree to this.
in terms of something like a balance spring. So when you have a balance spring that you have to manipulate in after-sales service, you have to get it flat, round, beating in the pins, etc. Again, I'm not saying is this something that's not possible, but it would be incredibly difficult to have the robotics to do that, because even when they're produced in factory, it's not how the process works. So then to be able to manipulate it, it's far faster and much more accurate to have a human being do it.
In fact, I built up the line System 51 during the time at Swatch Group with all these 100 of robots. You can do it. All the work a watchmaker is doing with the robot is a huge system. Really was complex like hell. At the end, instead of having watchmakers, we had 50 robotics engineers on the line. It was the same headache. Because you have also to hire them. But you have one point, if somebody do something manually, then it's not perfect. And I think that's the beauty of the part. Every part is a little bit different. If I go to a robot system, every part is the same. I can do millions of parts in the same way. But then it's not a tradition. And I tell you, this system 51, this movement, I have produced 70,000 a month. But they had no soul, this movement. Really not.
They used to call me robot, so it's okay. Oh yeah, no, for sure. The way that we're doing, I really can't believe, and if somebody can do, really, I would love to see it, but no, it's not possible. Yeah.
Any further questions?
You mentioned the System 51. Switzerland exports about 1 million watches a year now that are mechanical but cannot be repaired. What are your thoughts on this in terms of sustainability and developing the industry?
Thank you, my friend. I think it's becoming less acceptable by the day, and my personal view on traditional watchmaking is that, okay, it's a bit of a marketing claim, but a watch is sustainable by essence, basically, because with the mechanical movement, it uses inert metals that are, most of them noble metals that can be, I mean, you put your, any kind of mechanical watch in a drawer for 50 years, and then you come back to it, and you have any watchmaker having the possibility to make it work again. So this is for me the whole sustainability in the whole process. Everything else probably is going to be less/not acceptable anymore by the new generation. That's it. As simple as that.
Fini. Any further questions? Well, I'd like to thank members of the panel for participating today, and thank you to all of you for joining us for the panel.